Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Looking forward to this webinar. Pretty interesting one. Shows you how to sort of get vlingo based microservices up and running really quickly. Is everybody seeing my slide deck? Please, yes, okay. Great. Very good. And let's see, we're just approaching the top of the hour. Okay, so let's get started. Reactive DDD, accelerate your microservices development with vlingo xoom. So obviously we're very much into helping people accelerate their use of vlingo and to develop any sort of application or service based on, hang on one second, I just have to, I think my co-presenter is having, oh, there you are, Danilo. I'm just gonna, okay, now Danilo's gonna be all set. Okay, so let's get into this topic then. Reactive DDD, accelerate microservices development with vlingo xoom. Maybe you've been in on the tweet fest this week about, oh, microservices, such a bad name. Let's change the name to macroservices. I'm going to blog about this. I tweeted earlier, I don't have a problem with the word microservices, as in the word micro being included in that word. So we'll talk about that later, but we're going to focus on the use of vlingo. I'm the founder and chief architect of the vlingo platform. In case you haven't joined us before, this is a reactive platform for Java and .NET. Java is just ready to be 1.3.0 release. We're currently at, I think, 1.2.19. We burned a few versions on the Java side, getting our new CI/CD set up. And thanks to Petru, who presented last week about reactive storage. He's also has delivered our new CI/CD. You'll also find the .NET edition of vlingo at github.com/vlingo-net. The Java version is github.com/vlingo. And the .NET edition is getting very close to at least 0.9.0, I would say, very close to a full capabilities, maybe soon with a release candidate. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah, so this week, fun with microservices. I just hope that everybody doesn't panic too much over the word micro and the fact that, today we're presenting about accelerating your microservices development, emphasizing the word microservices. There's still a lot of good that we can get out of microservices. Just to, make a point, the word micro is still very versatile. As a little hint about my upcoming blog, When we talk about microprocessors, as in anywhere from a very low-end microprocessor that is used on IoT devices versus a powerful multi-core Intel processor, we're still talking about the same kind of thing in general. They are all categorized as microprocessors, right? So imagine that we can use the right size of a microservice for the job. Just like, we don't put a multi-core Intel processor on an IoT device. We just don't, right? So imagine now that we can actually use microservices to represent a variety of service sizes. And so again, I'll blog about that. Hopefully I'll get that blog post out later today. Reactive. So in case this is your first time to join us, reactive is underlying the whole idea of reactive is message driven. So you see there the green box says message driven. This is actually the primary driver for how we accomplish responsiveness, resiliency, and elasticity in our services or in our applications or whatever it is that we're building. And vlingo can certainly be used with monolithic architectures. Again, I'll talk about that in my blog post. So there's nothing about vlingo that says, oh, you always have to create microservices. If a monolith suits you best, you can certainly use that. So the past few weeks, we've been talking about vlingo in terms of a bounded context with entities. Those are the little circles with the E in them. These are entities. They are concepts within our ubiquitous language of our bounded context, but we can also refer to this as a rate service. And as I've explained before, this particular rate service is a service that calculates rates for insurance policies. So someone applies for a insurance policy. Before they're actually going to submit their application, they want to know if they can afford what they've signed up for on the application. So this is a rate service that calculates the rate of payment or the premium. We might even call it the premium calculator context or premium service or something like that, just to show the flexibility in the name and to be more precise with the name. So DDD modeling with vlingo and the power of auto persistence that also scales across a grid of cluster nodes. So that's what we've been talking about. This includes the object entity, which uses OR mapping. All of this is asynchronous. So when a rate, state, and or as well as domain events are persisted, they're persisted using an ORM. Stateful entity, this is where the state of the entity is saved to a key value store, and the key value store also supports domain events, and all of this, including with the object store, is atomic ACID transactions, right? So you don't get part of your state as in the state snapshot itself and the domain event persisted maybe, but both of them are guaranteed to persist together or not at all. And event sourcing, we also support, so rate could be implemented as an event sourced entity or aggregate, and as it is using a stream of domain events to represent its state, and also communicate potentially to the outside world what has happened with this rate. Those are stored also atomically in the journal table. Okay, so today we're getting into discussion about vlingo xoom, and this is where a rate service, a la microservice in terms of technology or pattern, but the rate service itself is a service that solves a set of problems, and particularly one important problem, and that is calculating a rate for an insurance policy so that an applicant can feel comfortable with, I can afford to submit an application for this insurance policy. Here we see a 3-node cluster, could be a 7-node cluster or a 9-node cluster or a 21-node cluster. And for what it's worth, it's always good to choose an odd number of cluster nodes because this helps in the basically in understanding that the cluster is in a quorum, and if there is an odd node or odd number of nodes like this 3-node cluster, if we lose a node, we still have a quorum. If we lose 2 nodes, we're no longer in a quorum. And so knowing that we are currently in the state of wanting to have 3 nodes alive at one time tells us, allows us to calculate the number of expected nodes to keep a quorum in place. Either 3 or 2 nodes would work. So this is all part of a consensus algorithm that we use for our vlingo cluster. And notice too that actors on different cluster nodes can talk to each other, and this is without any of the actors being required to know where the other actor is that it's trying to talk to. So you simply send a message to an actor because you have that actor's address, and the cluster figures out, or I should say vlingo lattice grid figures out where in the cluster that message should be delivered to the actor that's being sent, to which it's being sent. Well, so what about vlingo xoom itself? Vlingo xoom is meant to solve a few different problems. There are very important problems to solve. First of all, boot. How do you boot a service? Wouldn't it be great if you could just boot a service and that boot works very quickly? So any cluster nodes come alive very quickly. And they're also resilient in terms of the nodes themselves because, well, if we use Kubernetes to deploy, then any of those nodes that crash can be recovered very quickly, especially in a cloud environment. And so, for example, let's say that we lose the node in the upper right corner, that node goes away literally within milliseconds, or some agreed upon time of when is this service seen as crashed, then we can communicate, or I should say that Kubernetes will start that service again, or that node, and that node will operate within the cluster again very quickly. So it could even be that that node could be discovered again and part of the consensus before the rest of the cluster even has an opportunity to recognize it as missing. It might miss a single heartbeat, but say 2 or 3 heartbeats are expected within a time frame, and if we see at least one of those heartbeats within a time frame, then we actually haven't lost that node at all, at least for the most part. We're also concerned with quick start in vlingo xoom. So how do we as developers actually quickly start the development of any sort of service, microservice, application, whatever it is that we're developing, and how do we accomplish a quick boot itself, as in how quickly does a vlingo xoom node start up? And this has even more to do with not just the resiliency of the cluster, but also an opportunity to use vlingo as function as a service, or basically, AWS Lambda, or whatever it happens to be, the underlying technology. These services can start up very quickly and become hot very quickly in terms of warm-up time because of the technologies that we support. So we'll see how that works. So let's take a look at each of these. Very commonly, vlingo boots within 10 to 30 milliseconds. So let's say that you're using vlingo HTTP, which we will in the near future have a webinar on that topic of vlingo HTTP, a very lightweight HTTP REST-based server. How long does it take to boot that? Well, actually, if you don't do a lot of logging, which is also asynchronous, but if you don't have a lot of logging involved, the boot actually happens almost imperceptibly. You can't perceive the length of time, because almost as soon as you hit enter at the command line to start your service, it's running. Okay, but with vlingo xoom, we see times as low as 10 to 30 milliseconds. This is what gives vlingo xoom the capability of being used under function as a service. We also support graalvm. The real sort of stickler with graalvm is, for the most part, you don't want to use reflection with graalvm. You can use reflection, and in some very minimal places in vlingo, we do require the use of reflection, but we can simply tell graalvm that this specific component uses reflection, and so it can be prepared to handle reflective method invocations, for example, within a specific kind of component. So big advantage to vlingo xoom, it can run, it can boot quickly, very quickly. It can also run in graalvm very rapidly, as in basically like a native application or process. Another part of vlingo xoom that we're very focused on is quick starter. So this is in terms of development quick starter. How will we get to the status of my project is ready to run, and we can actually use Maven to build the project, the service, very rapidly, and you can literally see your service running on your developer machine literally within seconds. I might even add less than a minute, and you'll see a demo of this. We're experimenting with a few different ways of having a quick start, and Danilo is going to present today the command line interface for quick start. And I'll show you a little bit about our experiment with GUI, as in a web interface for quick start. And this is not quite ready for prime time, although Danilo's is actually a ready to use utility that you can use today. So you can today download vlingo xoom starter for command line, and you can use it to create your first service or your next service with vlingo. The other part of vlingo xoom that's important is the microframework, and the microframework itself can support annotations. I've never been big on the use of annotations, you know, where sort of the annotations obscure what's actually happening, but I admit that there are times when annotations work very well, and it's a big time saving to use annotations. So Vlingo Xoom does support annotations, even though the rest of Vlingo is not based on annotations at all. You can still use the annotations of Vlingo Xoom to wire things up or weave things quickly. But the important part of this is not only do we have annotation support, but it's not runtime or startup time weaving of or interpretation of the annotations. Instead, it's compile time. And the compile time helps by ensuring that we don't pay a penalty at startup time of the service itself. So for example, that's how we can get very low startup times, or one of the reasons we can get very low startup times with Vlingo Xoom, even if you decide to use annotations for it. And so, in fact, this is the quick boot that enables us to support function as a service, if that is the kind of service that you want to implement. So with that, let's turn our attention to Danilo. He's going to provide a demo of Vlingo Xoom in general, and also the command line interface, and then I will return with a demo of the GUI, web-based interface. Okay, so Danilo, you are on. Can everybody hear Danilo, by the way? No. Okay, hold on, Danilo. People can't hear you. Do you have your microphone turned on? It's in the upper left corner. Turn on your microphone. The upper left corner of the webinar control panel.
You hear me now?
Yes, hear you now.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, does everybody hear? Yes, okay. Go ahead, Danilo.
Okay, so let's get started. My intention for today's webinar is to implement a microservice, and we have three goals: implement a microservice, deploy it on Kubernetes, and expose our REST resource with Glue Gateway API. I want to make clear that it's not my intention to explore all the resources that we have on the Vlingo Xoom. The idea here is to show how to quickly start implementing a microservice using Xoom. And as Vaughn mentioned, we have a nice tool that we have recently implemented. It's called Vlingo Xoom Starter. And we have a sort of command line tool. It's a very simple interface to use. And we will try this tool to quickly start using Vlingo Xoom. sometimes when you are facing a new platform or a new framework, sometimes you feel uncomfortable to a new platform. That's pretty normal. It's normal, and we have created this bilingual Zoom starter to make bilingual Zoom even more friendly to developers, so we can rapidly start coding with bilingual Zoom. So let's say that for our microservice today, we want to create a very simple service that relies on a single aggregate. Let's say that we have logistics bound context, and we want to create a stock aggregate. So we will have just 3 basic operations. We want to be able to open a stock in a specific location, in a specific city, and we want to be able to increase the available quantity for a specific item for that stock. And we want to also be able to query the stocks that are persisted in our database. So that's the idea, very simple use case, just to show how we can start the bilingual Zoom application very quickly. So let's take a look at our bilingual Zoom starter. Here it is. We have a short documentation. It's very easy to start using bilingual Zoom starter. So,
hey, Danilo, just pause for 1 second. Actually, personally, all that I see is a lion.
oh, sorry.
But
yeah.
somehow you're...
Oh, I think that we have a one. Okay.
So right now I see File Explorer, I think on Windows.
Oh, okay. I think I shared the, let me try to re-enable my screen.
Okay.
Okay.
I still see Windows. I still see Windows only. Ah, okay. There you go.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So I shared the wrong screen. So as I mentioned, I want to start using the bilingual Zoom starter. So basically, we have a very simple command line interface. So all I need to do is to download the distribution file. I'm currently using Windows, so I will download the starter. Okay, so I can download, and I will unzip this file. Okay, now I'm ready to use the bilingual Zoom starter, and we have a set of parameters that I can set to customize my project generation. So we have some Maven parameters, and as I mentioned, I want to deploy my bilingual Zoom application on Kubernetes, so I can set a property here in the deployment. If I set Kubernetes, the bilingual Zoom starter will automatically generate some Kubernetes configuration files. So it will save a lot of time. And so let's start editing. The vlingo zoom. Oh, home directory. Okay, here it is. So I would like to update the vlingo zoom starter properties. I will change the group ID. I put some information for Maven project. I will change the artifact ID as well. And this is the base package for my new project. It will generate the new project under the projects folder. This is the vlingo zoom server version. I use the latest version. And if I want to deploy on Kubernetes, I need to inform the application image on Docker Hub, and I have already created a public repository for our example, and the POD name on Kubernetes. So I will call it stock. So this is everything we need to set up, and we can run and generate our new. If you are using Mac OS or Linux, Ubuntu, or so on, we already have a shell script for Unix-based OS. So, but as I'm using Windows, I run this batch script. Okay. Our project has been successfully generated. So I will open my IDE. Just 1 second. So here is our new vlingo zoom project. So vlingo zoom starter generated some default classes here. We have the bootstrap class that is responsible to initialize our server. And an interesting thing is that our vlingo zoom current version is powered by Microservices. That's a very nice microframework. It has a very fast startup time, as Vaughn mentioned, and we have to create our domain model here. So I don't want to spend a lot of time typing here, so I will put some bunch of code here just to speed up our presentation. So as I mentioned, we want to create a single aggregate to support our domain model. And we have here a very simple factory method to create our stock entity. And as you can see here, we just create an actor for our aggregate. So all we need to do is to tell the stage that is responsible to maintain the actor to create a new actor in order to perform the opening stock here for a specific location. So we can take a look at our stock entity that extends object entity that is an actor as well. So we can, as we can see here, we just open the stock by changing its state, that it's persistent, it's auto-persistent, so we can save our new stock. And besides the domain, we need to store our stock entity, so we need some storage configuration as well. So here is our storage configuration. For this example, I'm using the in-memory object store actor. So it's pretty simple. I think it's the more easy to use if you want to create a project very rapidly. So if you want to know a bit more about the object entity and the object store, I encourage you to take a look at the previous webinar. That's there's a video on YouTube on Vernon channel, so you can take a look at it. I won't go into details now, but these are storage configuration. So once I have this configuration, I'm able to save my stock entity or in-memory object store actor. So finally, we need to expose the stock aggregate operations in a REST API. So let's create some resource. Okay. Now we have the stock resource that's responsible to expose our REST operations on stock aggregate. So it's pretty simple. It's important to notice that everything here happens asynchronously. So zero blocking code here, and that's actor all about. We always use message to communicate between objects. And finally, I will just run my stock application. I will package, and I forgot to mention that when we generate the project with the vlingo Zoom starter, we also have some mapping plugin configurations to enable a runnable jar right here. So once we have a runnable jar, we can start the vlingo Zoom server. Just by running our jar. Okay, everything is okay. So one thing that we have when we choose to generate a Kubernetes project with the vlingo Zoom starter, it's the Docker file is automatically generated by the vlingo Zoom starter, and we have also a very basic resource for Kubernetes. So let's move on and deploy our application on Kubernetes. First of all, I need to build the Docker image. Let's say stock latest. Okay. And now I need to just confirm the repository name. Okay. So let's tag it. Now we can push. Oops. So I will publish our Docker image for the stock service. Okay. Finally, I can deploy my stock service on Kubernetes. Let's check if Kubernetes is running fine. Okay, so I can deploy it. As I mentioned, we already have our Kubernetes config file automatically generated. So I can deploy it. Let's check if the POD is running fine. Okay. So at last, we need to expose our stock service REST API using the Glue Gateway API, which is a cloud-native gateway. It's a very robust tool, and all I need to do is to install it. This is the Glue CLI, so I can install the gateway using the Glue CLI. And one cool feature that we have in Glue is that when you install the gateway, it automatically uses the service discovery to recognize available services running on Kubernetes. So as soon as you install the gateway, you have upstreams created for your running service on Kubernetes. In this case, we have the default stock upstream for Kubernetes service. And so we, to finish the gateway configuration, we just need to add the route to map the gateway route to our REST service. So let's add a route mapping. This will be the service, the REST route called stocks, and we want to map to our automatically generated upstream, and we will map to our REST API that's already running on Kubernetes. Oops, wrong type. Okay, let me check if everything's fine. Okay. Now, if you want to test our gateway API, we can use the curl, but today I'm gonna use my Postman. I have some collections here. And let's create, I forgot to check I use this command to know the proxy URL. Perfect. My Glue gateway API is running at localhost port 80. So I can configure my Postman. Okay, perfectly. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is to send a request to your gateway API. So in the end, I will have a new stock for this location, Los Angeles. And okay, perfect. I have a brand new stock here. And I can increase the availability for item ID 2 for that specific location. I will increase the quantity once again. For the same item. And finally, I can query the stocks for that specific location. We can check the available quantity, and here it is. And so this is the purpose of the vlingo Zoom starter. And you can create very rapidly a brand new project using the vlingo Zoom. And we are currently adding more features to the vlingo Zoom starter. So for instance, further we will be able to have automatically generated storage configuration. You can automatically generate entities and REST resources, but this will be available very soon. So I think that's all, Vaughn. This is my example to show how we can use the Zoom starter. May I turn the presenter to you, Vaughn?
Yes, thank you. I've just taken the presenter. Really excellent, Danilo. I appreciate you sharing that with everyone. Just to note, this is, again, very new, the vlingo Zoom starter that I'm showing you, which is a web interface. So this is how you can create other aspects of what Danilo was just showing, or additional aspects. What Danilo just showed you is this context that you see here. So this includes the Maven group ID, the artifact ID, the artifact version, base package name, the project directory where that's going to be, and the vlingo Zoom version that this service, this generated service will be based on. And then the other part is deployment. This additionally gives you the ability to state how many cluster nodes you'd like to have, and will this be a Docker only deployment, or do you want Kubernetes? And if it's Kubernetes, the Kubernetes image and pod name can be provided here. Now, before we move on to the other part of this, I just wanted to express something. Again, as Danilo said, this is an early version. I still think that there was too much typing around Docker, Kubernetes, all that. We'll simply be generating those scripts for you, to do those steps automatically. Some of them you'll still have to do, like checking statuses of images and pods and the Glue API gateway. But point being, this is going to be very turnkey. Now, so I've shown you the context. And Danilo, what was the name of your company? It was xoom Organization.
Yeah.
xoom Organization, and your artifact ID was stock.
Exactly.
Oh, you also had here like
Yeah.
logistics?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the artifact ID is stock. Hey, you know what? On the Vlingo team, our stuff always compiles and works the first time, so we're just going to go artifact version 1. And you don't believe me, do you? Why not? Okay, so organization.
Yes.
That's the base package.
Yes.
Okay, here's our, just going to say this is, let's just call it logistic stocks, right? And Vlingo version 3. Let's say that we're going to use maximum of 7 cluster nodes, and we're going to call this image. And Danilo, the pod name can be the
Can
same?
be, if you want to use the same name, I use it on stock for POD name.
Okay, well, let's just say, I'm pretending here. So that's sort of, the high level, pretty much what Danilo just showed you. But here's a new idea that we have. So what if you could define your aggregates and say that person registered, maybe it's even better, customer, right? Customer registered, customer relocated, customer upgraded. Okay, maybe they got a premium service. And let's say that we also have, we're selling vehicles. So vehicle, a vehicle can be registered. A vehicle can be sold, and a vehicle can be purchased, right? So this is sort of the beginning. What we're going to add is also the ability to just create a REST endpoint or a resource handler for each of these if you want one. And the idea is at the end of the day, you simply say generate, and we're going to generate the service name stock right now. And there you see the status that it was generating, but actually we didn't do anything yet with that. So that's still to come. But this is where we're headed, and you can imagine that there are lots of things that we can sort of jumpstart for you, and so we'll be doing that very soon. Just want to mention that, we have, again, budget-friendly developer support and production support. We support monthly support, programs, $75 a month for starting. We're going to be, making all of these much more readily available for getting sort of bootstrapped with Vlingo, Vlingo Xoom, and other parts of Vlingo. So looking forward to having more companies use this platform. And so how do you do it? Well, try it. Danilo, just by the way, tell everyone, I'm going to give the screen back to you, show them where they can find the starter and the README instruction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Let me give you.
Let me share my screen once again. Okay, can you see my screen, Vaughn? Can you see my screen?
No.
Oh, oh, okay. So you can get more information about the vlingo Zoom starter on our GitHub. github.com/vlingo/vlingo Zoom starter. Here you'll find some documentation about how to use the vlingo Zoom starter. You will see the parameters description as well, and every information you need to start using the vlingo Zoom starter.
And note, I think to Danilo, at the top, see the dist folder or directory.
Yeah,
that's where you'll find the.
Yeah, we have 2 files here, one for Windows and other for Unix-based OS, starter tar.gz, and you can use it it's very simple, as I mentioned. You have only 2 steps to use, actually 3 steps. You should download the distribution file, add the properties file, and finally you can run the starter script only using a command, very simple. By the way, Vaughn, just to mention, you can download this distribution file simply by using the curl, and everything's ready.
Excellent, excellent, good. Okay, we have just a few questions here. Are you sharing your VM with sample project? I'm sorry, what VM? This is Renat. And is there a .NET equivalent? Not yet. There will be. Right now, Tomasz Jaskula is working on the Lattice grid. And boy, it would be great if someone could jump in and help him with Zoom. Oh, okay. Sorry. Did you not see the web interface? Is anyone still there? We are seeing the desktop. Did I share my screen properly for showing vlingo Zoom web interface? Ah, okay. Actually, I gotta take presenter back. Okay, my apologies, folks. Very quickly, the context page, this is, or tab, this is what Danilo was previously demoing, and also the deployment page, and then you can create your model, or at least parts of it, and we'll also support soon generating the REST service for, or REST endpoint for each of these aggregate types. Yeah, so you can see how the UI changes, and let's say that we create a new aggregate that something, and we decided we didn't like that, we can delete it, right? Pretty simple interface to use, and the idea is we don't actually, you know, want to generate a lot of no business logic or anything like that, but when it comes to wiring up, you saw that there is a bit of code for getting, you know, this or that different storage interface implemented, you know, ready to run. So we're taking care of some of that sort of boilerplate stuff for you. Let's see, any other questions? Yeah, so one, you asked, will it work with Gradle too? There's no reason why the Xoom starter couldn't work with Gradle. It's all Java code behind the scenes. So again, you know, we have our hands full trying to get this, you know, the whole platform increasing. Juan, if you know Gradle really well, why don't you jump in and help Danilo by supporting Gradle? That'd be great. I think also though that could create a Maven plugin that would also support be supported on Gradle. So that's another opportunity to use it with Gradle. Okay, just seeing if there are any more questions. Yeah, so look for this in the next, you know, by let's say early next week, we'll have quite a bit more done on this, and just jump out there now and get started with it. As you can see, there's a big head start available to you now. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for staying with us for the full hour, and we will see you next week. And I think next week what we're going to do is present on vlingo HTTP. Okay, so that should be interesting to everyone to see how the lightweight REST services work. All right, so thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.